evening. Welcome to another episode of Edge of Reality TV. I'm Willie Hassell, along with Lynn Nickerson.
Hello.
And how are you doing tonight, Lynn?
Great. And yourself?
Great. I'm doing good. And you know what? It's only a couple more days to the until the big Parafest.
Big Parafest.
Did you forget?
Yeah. Well, I was holding my breath.
Oh, you were holding your breath. Okay.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that.
It's coming up this Saturday, the 29th, at the Kittery Community Center in Kittery, Maine, and that is the New England Parafest 2017. But more importantly, right at the moment,
we have a marvelous guest introduced.
Great guest in the studio.
Yeah,
and I'm going to have to put my glasses on so I can read. But our guest tonight is Joni Mayhan. She is a paranormal investigator and author of 16 books, I believe it is, on the paranormal.
That's right.
With a lifetime of personal experiences, Joni has many accounts of her own experiences with the other side. Her latest book is titled Spirit Nudges, Allowing Help from the Other Side. So please, let's welcome to the show, Joni Mayhan.
Welcome, Joni.
Welcome, Joni.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming all the way from Indiana.
From Indiana. It's a long trip.
It was a long drive.
Long walk, yeah.
Long walk, yeah. Oh, I thought she rode a bicycle.
She's very devoted. We're so glad to have you here. It's really worth saying you've got 16 books out
I do,
now.
yes, 16
It's
books.
amazing. You've got 2 science fiction trilogies.
Yeah, they're more young adult dystopian with a paranormal element because I couldn't leave out the paranormal.
Oh, no.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It sneaks in whether you want it to or not, in real life too.
And then actually your very latest one you've just come out with, which is Dark and Scary Places. That is actually the latest one, isn't it?
No, Spirit Nudges is my newest one.
Oh, it
Yeah,
is?
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
Dark and Scary is out?
Dark and Scary Things, yes, that's been out. I wrote that one last year, so.
Oh, okay.
It was really a compilation. I used to teach a Paranormal 101 class in the town of Gardner, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And I had all this great information that I'd researched and experienced, and I decided to put it together into a comprehensive book so that people could, people could use it as pretty much a guidebook on anything spiritual, especially people coming into their abilities. They don't always know what to do and what they're experiencing, and it gives them a lot of good resources.
Yeah, it was a great idea, the approach you took on that book. I wanted to mention that Signs of Spirits and then Spirit Nudges, they're kind of similar and they sort of complement each other. And a lot of this stuff contains your own personal experiences, and then you've got some wonderful personal testimonies from other people. But I wanted to start off with how people can go about getting in touch with the spirit world if they're really interested in becoming a bit more psychic.
I think that not everybody is born with abilities, but a lot of people have them and they aren't aware of them, or they haven't tapped into them, or maybe they're afraid and they're repressing anything that they do have. I was born with abilities, and I was in my 40s before I finally embraced it and decided to work on it. Well, it was scary because ghosts were coming at me all the time, and when you open that door, you can't close it again. So you have to really think hard, do I really want this life? And I'm glad I did, because it's given me some pretty amazing experiences. But for
you
people,
were also older and you could handle it a little
I could
better,
handle it,
too.
and I was more confident, and I had a better support system at the time. When you're raising little kids and you have a husband that doesn't believe in ghosts, it's not an easy.
Makes it difficult.
It makes it difficult. So I was surrounded with people. I was by that time doing paranormal investigations, so I had a network of people around me that could help me with validation. And I think that, one of the key things is, if you're trying to develop your abilities, is to find somebody that either is better than you or going through the same thing you're going through.
Yeah.
Because having that person to validate what you're experiencing, if you feel a ghost come up, and just asking them, what are you feeling right now? And if it's similar to what you're feeling, then you're on the right track.
It's great to get the confirmation.
Right,
Because you
right.
sometimes just don't know if it's your imagination or not.
Right, right. And it takes a while to really develop the confidence and the know-how to get to that point where you are pulling accurate information.
Mm-hmm. You did make a distinction between spirits and ghosts.
I do.
Could you kind of explain that a little bit for everybody?
Yes, I really feel that when we die, we cross through the white light and we go on to another place. And for practical purposes, I'll call that place heaven, because that's what everybody's aware of.
Yeah.
And there we meet with our spirit guides and our maker, and we go through spiritual interactions with them to learn and grow and heal, maybe from what we've experienced. And then we're allowed to come back and visit our loved ones when we're ready. And that would be a spirit. Now, a ghost would be somebody that sees the white light and balks. They don't, maybe, guilt, or maybe they have family members. I think guilt and fear is a big one, because,
Yeah.
you think about what people learn as humans. If we do something that we consider bad, we're taught that we're going to go right to hell. So if they see that white light and they perceive they've done something bad, they're fearful of what's going to come next.
They
So
don't feel worthy.
They don't cross through. Suicide victims are a big one too.
Yeah.
They hang back. Or people that have family, or suppose a house, a house that they love and don't want to leave, and they don't trust anybody else to take care of it. So they don't go through. So those would be ghosts. So once they go through the white light, they can be trusted, and they're usually, if they come to you, they're going to be friends or family members that you knew in life. If a ghost could be anybody, anything, from anywhere.
So either way, whether it's a ghost or a spirit crossed over to the light or not, they can still come back and interact.
Yeah, I think it's, we don't know everything about this. A lot of what it is speculation and experiences and talking to other people. But I think depending on their ability, I've encountered, as a sensitive, I can tell when there's a ghost nearby. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to interact with humans. Sometimes they just want to be left alone. They just want to be there, and they don't want people to know they're there. And other times, they're very high performing. They know how to turn lights on and off, how to bang on walls, and how to appear in front of you, which is pretty rare, but it does happen. And so there's different levels. It's almost like, sometimes I wonder if it has something to do with people's abilities in life. Like somebody with strong psychic medium abilities, if they died, if they'd be much more apt to be able to, bang on walls and show themselves than somebody who was a skeptic in life.
It's got to take, I don't understand how they learn so quickly how to manipulate the energy to either appear or to make noise or to create smells, that sort of thing. I think it's kind of interesting. They wind up hanging around, and it's almost like they're learning stuff on the other side. They are learning to manipulate energy.
Oh yeah, if you think they're not watching us, think again,
Yeah,
because
I know.
they're studying. Well, you think about, some people are really good with tech things, hooking up a VCR or a computer, or doing something like that. Electronics, and some ghosts are really good at electronics. They'll mess with your phone, or they'll mess with your electrical circuits in your house.
Lights.
And maybe that was somebody with the know-how when they were living, so they brought that over to the other side with them.
Yeah.
And do you think it's, like Lynn said, they seem to learn fast? Do you think it's actually a case of they're learning fast, or there just isn't any time over there? And
I don't know. It could be either. From what I've learned, time is irrelevant. They can go back and forth in different time periods. So time is something that only really impacts the living. The dead time is non-existent.
Right.
So
I think what is relevant, though, is perhaps their aptitudes and their propensities, or their talents in life probably translate on the other side. So an electrician might learn how to manipulate the energy a little bit quicker.
Right.
What about those that you've encountered that they've passed for a bit, and there's supposedly a window of time where you can go to the light, pretty quickly after you pass over, maybe after your funeral. But then there are those who do hang around the house. Is there some kind of a window that they pass up their opportunity to go to the light, so they need someone to intercede on their behalf, such as yourself? Is that a typical scenario?
I think that they have free will, so I believe that they can always cross over.
Oh.
I think that a lot of it's perception, though. They don't feel they can. And they still hold on to those fears. If I cross over, what am I going to find on the other side? So we do help them cross as often as we can, but a lot of it is through counseling. It's almost like sitting down with somebody who has a lot of problems and just explaining to them that God loves them, they're welcome, and they can go over. And sometimes just that reassurance, that hand-holding allows them to make that crossing on their own. So.
Well, you also mentioned once you're over there, you know, soul groups and twin flames and soulmates. Do you, I can't remember now if it was your story. I think it was your story. You were going to meet someone you wanted to date.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was a really interesting story because, you know, the concept of a twin flame or a soulmate has always been somewhat elusive to me because I really never felt like I met somebody who fit that role.
You fit that role.
And I recently met a woman in New Harmony, Indiana, where I now live, who is a psychic medium. And Crystal, within meeting me, she said, I see someone with you, and I identify them as your soulmate. And she said, but he died before you could meet. And she said, I think, did he die in a car accident? And it brought me back to another psychic medium years ago who told me the same thing, that that my soulmate died before I could meet him. Well, as it turns out, when I was 17 years old, I get cold chills thinking about these things, but I had a date, somebody had set up a blind date with me with somebody, and I don't even remember his name. That's terrible, but it's been a long time. And he died in a car accident before we could meet. And it was devastating to me. I mean, maybe I was 17 and emotional, you know, but I really carried that for years, that I didn't meet this person. I felt it was strongly that I needed to meet them. So, so that was
So
an interesting synchronicity there.
Oh, really? For them to hit
Yeah.
and be so accurate. How about once you're over here, identifying with other people in your soul group? You talked a lot about souls and soul groups.
Well, I believe in reincarnation, so I do believe that the soul continues on, that the body is only a meat and bones vehicle that we wear. And we basically come here to learn, and we have life lessons, and we don't do it alone. We have our spirit guides who are with us all the time, and we have members of our soul family. So there's different levels of soul families, but the primary group will generally reincarnate with each other each lifetime, and that's by design. It's set up that way prior to coming back.
Yeah.
And you're drawn to each other. It's hard to deny. You feel like you know that person, and you're very attached to them almost immediately, and you just click. And there's a lot of people that once you talk about that, they shake their heads and they think, yes, I know, they can identify their soul family just from thinking about it.
Yeah.
So.
Even in thinking about sometimes dreams that I've had, I've identified people in the dream, even though they didn't look anything like they do now, but it was their energy signature that I recognized.
Right, right. Well, I believe that everybody vibrates, everything in this world vibrates at a certain frequency, and people of the same soul families have the same frequency, so like attracts like, so it's almost like magnets that they're pulled into us.
Yeah. Think Willie and I knew each other?
Oh, I think so, definitely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Someone said he was a Viking.
Yeah, I've been told a couple of times I was
Really?
a Viking at one time,
And
Wow.
a Civil
And,
War officer.
and a sea captain. Of course, that could be the Viking thing too, I
Yeah,
guess.
and then
you
a
know.
Civil War officer.
Well, those are very
I was a
awesome
good guy
things.
anyways.
Yeah.
Well, how about in being in this time frame, if there really is time within our 3D world, interpreting signs that loved ones send us?
I think that most people have been contacted by loved ones and they miss the signs because they're waiting. As humans, we're oblivious. And I think we're waiting for this prominent made-for-TV sign to come to us, something big. And, you know, when it actually could be something as a penny on the sidewalk, or a feather on your pillow, or the scent of your mother's perfume at an odd time, or there's so many different signs, and it takes a lot of energy for them to manipulate our physical world. So the sign is usually going to be subtle, and we'll miss it, or we'll explain it away as coincidence, or we'll rationalize it, because that's what we do. We have to find a reason for everything, and sometimes you just can't find a reason.
Well, you know, you mentioned something at the very beginning of, I can't remember which book it was, but about believing, about, you know, suspending disbelief and believing in stuff that you can't explain, and then letting it come.
Well, and I really do believe that belief is the on button. Because
with
once, if you're too skeptical, you're blocking yourself, and you're not going to feel these things. You're not going to experience it, and they're not going to. It's almost like building a wall up around you. So if you don't believe, it's not going to happen. Not to say that those skeptics don't have ghost experiences sometimes, which
they don't
turns them.
recognize it.
Yeah, it turns them from a skeptic to a believer usually, but sometimes they still rationalize those things until they just can't.
Well, how about yourself? I know you've received some signs from loved ones. Would you care to tell us a couple of those?
Well, my favorite one comes from Signs of Spirits, and every time I tell it, I get goosebumps. I was very close to my grandparents as a child, and I was the first grandchild, so I was spoiled beyond belief. And my grandmother, who I called Nanny, died at the same age I am right now, which is a little weird to me because, she was old and I'm not old, But she died of a heart attack in the middle of her sleep. And she had had heart problems all of her life, so nobody was really that surprised. But a couple of nights after she died, I had a dream. And mind you, I was only 6 years old, so there's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have known as a 6-year-old. But in the dream, my mother and I were going to her house to clean out her closets to donate clothing to the Salvation Army. I would have never experienced that before, so I wouldn't have known that. So that was kind of interesting. But the dream had a texture to it that was really very realistic. It felt more like a memory than a dream.
Yeah.
I could smell the way their house smelled. I could see, I could feel. Everything was so real. And we came up the stairs and into the living room, and Nanny was sitting on the sofa. My mother didn't see her and walked
you
right
saw
by
her?
her. Well, in the dream, yeah, I saw her. And I said, Nanny, Nanny. I ran and jumped in her lap and hugged her, and I said, I thought you died. And she said, I did, but I couldn't leave without saying goodbye to you.
Oh, my gosh.
And then I woke up. And people often have dreams of loved ones. That's one of the more common signs of ways that they connect with them. But you can have a dream where you're just dreaming about your loved one, and it's not necessarily a sign. But a visitation dream feels different. It has
does
a
feel
realistic
different.
texture to it, and this one definitely did. And she's come back to me several times.
Has she?
Yeah, when I was 18 years old, she saved my life.
Really? Tell us about that.
I was
In the
driving.
car, right?
Yeah. She's been with me all my life. Psychic mediums have picked up on her. But when I was 18, I was driving back from a job interview, and I was driving a 76 Grand Prix, which is a very big car.
Yeah.
And I was probably going a little faster than I needed to go. And all of a sudden, her face popped in my head, and she said, slow down. And it was enough that I'd never had that happen before, somebody's face pop in my head like that. And so I did. I slowed down, and my front tire on my car blew at that moment.
Did
And
it really?
had I blown that tire going 80 miles an hour, I probably would have flipped the car, being an experienced driver, and I might have died. But she was able to warn me to a point where I was able to slow down, and then I was able to coast to the side of the road, and I didn't lose control of the steering or anything. So
Wow,
she saved my life.
Wow. That's very powerful.
It is.
So you not only saw her face, but you heard her speaking to you?
Yes, very adamantly. You did not listen to that. It was very, very clear that I needed to slow down.
Well, that was another point I wanted to bring up, that people sometimes hear voices in their head, that they might not hear the voice, but they hear the distinct words
Yes.
that are not their own.
Right.
And they brush it off as imagination oft times, which usually is fatal or it's a big mistake. But how about that?
Yeah, and that's really, I call those nudges.
Nudges,
And it's really the concept behind my Spirit Nudges book, because I've been getting those pretty much all my life. And as I started talking to other people, I realized that they have too, but they just assume it's intuition or their own voice in their head that we all have. But it usually has a different feeling to it.
It does.
The first thing is it's in third person. It's not in first person.
That's right.
So you wouldn't say, I need to, well, here's a good
I need to slow down. It's you need to slow down.
Here's a good example. My grandmother often, she's still with me, and she coaxes me. One day, I needed to be working on my new book, but I was on Facebook. And I was scrolling, and I was just mindlessly sitting there, and I heard her in my mind. She said, "You need to get off Facebook and work on your book." And it wasn't I need to get off Facebook, it was you.
You.
Okay, so I continued to scroll. Second time, "You need to get off Facebook." And I ignored her. Third time, "You need to get off Facebook." I ignored her, and then my internet went out.
Just cut out.
Cut out. So she took care of things. And I was like, yeah, okay, all right, I get it, you know. And a skeptic would say, oh, well, your internet just went out. It was nothing. But
Happened at the right moment, though.
It happened at the right moment, and it was good. I had a really good writing day that day, and she was absolutely right. I needed to stop goofing off and get to work.
Oh, that's so funny.
So
I had something really similar, and I'll just say it real briefly, but I had left a dentist appointment, and I had to get back on the highway to get back to work. And the minute I got into the car and grabbed the steering wheel, I kept hearing this crunching metal in my head. I was convinced I was going to get into an accident, but work was so far away, I had to take the highway. It would have taken me forever, twice as long. So I got on the highway, and I drove at 40 miles an hour, and I'm just going along the right-hand lane thinking, all these people are whizzing by me. Well, they started weaving in and out of me because I was going so slow, and a couple of them weaved in front of me, and there in the road was this huge piece of metal, like sheet metal that had fallen off the truck. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, is it going to blow my tires, and am I going to go off the road? I went over it. There was that horrible crunch of metal in my head, and I continued on, and I thought, oh my gosh, thank God, because it didn't blow out the tires.
right.
But I was thinking, what if I had gone faster? Would I have found myself just behind this truck that dropped the metal? I mean, if I hadn't slowed down and been really cautious. So I went over it anyway, but at least, you know, it could have come right through the windshield.
Yeah, I had visions of Final Destination just go through my head. So,
Yes.
you know, that's scary. And
is
so I
scary.
really do feel that somebody
You're giving
gave you a
nudges.
sign and really saved you.
That's all I
Yeah.
could hear in my head was a crunching metal until I ran over it and heard it for real. So these things do happen. I think you're crazy if you don't listen to them.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
have to
And
tune your...
there was another one of my friends, Crystal Pena from my Paranormal 101 class,
Yes.
she shared a story with me. She said she really wasn't sure, is this a sign or not? But as she was driving, she thought a car was flashing its headlights, like to
Oh.
warn her of something up ahead. And
That was an odd one.
yeah, and then as it got closer, she realized, but it kept flashing. Like it didn't just flash once; it kept flashing. And she slowed down, and when she came around the corner, they were doing some kind of road construction, like right around the corner. She would have been going her current speed. She probably would have
Hit somebody?
hit somebody.
Yeah.
And so it was, you know, was it a warning or was it coincidental? I don't know, but it worked.
A little bit of both, I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
think.
So
Yeah, thank God
there's
she
a lot
did
of
heed.
strange signs that could come that people aren't aware of if they're
Yes.
listening.
I got to start paying more attention.
You do.
I know that.
I've said that he has a little bit of psychic ability, but he just, you know, passes it off.
I really don't think I have any, but
No, that's not true.
maybe there's a little bit.
You know,
in
you
there
get
somewhere.
perceptive on some investigations.
A little bit there. Something.
Have you kind of dropped your investigating now? Are you focusing pretty much just on the writing?
I'm in a different environment now, and I'm away from all my parapeeps. So I'm in
Your
Indiana. Parapeeps, paranormal people.
Oh,
my
okay.
parapeeps. Sorry. But I am currently writing a book called Haunted New Harmony because the town I moved to is a very historic old town. And when I moved there, I was astounded that there was a ghost in almost every building. And I thought, how could this be? And so I got curious, and my investigations are a little different now. I walk in intuitively and see what I can pick up. And I might bring my digital recorder to see if anybody wants to talk to me.
Yeah.
But I'm not doing the traditional setting up equipment, and I don't really need to because my body is my best tool.
Yeah, I do the walkthroughs on our investigations, and that's what I feel. I need to walk through and sense the
We rely
place.
on Lynn to go in first and
Yeah.
tell us whether or not we need to bother.
And then we pick up on the electronic equipment that sometimes complements what I've just sensed. So,
Right,
but
and you
I'm
know
with
where to
you.
you know where to put the equipment based on what you're finding. So
Yes.
I think every paranormal team should have a medium.
Well, yeah, I think so too. I think it's a
I-
good
I
combination.
I didn't think so at first, but now
You
I
did?
do. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
way back, but
Okay.
but now I do.
You've grown.
Yeah, I've grown, yeah.
But yeah, often when you walk into a place, I don't need to be told that there's something there now.
Right, right.
Generally speaking. Usually if I get the sense that the place is haunted, it is. I might not always pick up on something, but I generally do know. Well, let me see. You talked to Sam Baltrusis, and we were talking about past lives a minute ago, and he thought that he was a female and that he had been stoned to death
Right,
for being unfaithful.
right, right.
Did he get an idea of when this was?
I don't remember. I think it was like back in maybe the 1700s. But he remembers seeing a movie screen or something.
That's
So
right.
maybe it wasn't that late. Maybe it was more 1800s.
He
He
says,
saw some kind of
theater.
marquee sign in the
theater,
background.
yeah.
So it could have been a lot more current than that. But he felt that it was strong enough that he felt that it was a past life. And
Yeah.
Sam's very intuitive as well. So
I think he is.
when he picks up on things, I tend to trust what he's picking up on.
Did you get to meet him?
Oh, I've met him several times. Yeah,
Oh,
we
did you?
shared a booth at a recent Paracon together.
Very cool.
And we coordinate. I wrote the introduction in a couple of his books. His new book coming out, Haunted Hotels, 13 Most Haunted Hotels, I think.
Okay, see, I haven't read that one yet, but we
It's
did
not
have
out
him
yet.
on.
It's not out yet, but
Okay.
he asked me to write his introduction for that as
Yeah.
well. So
Well, Sam he was on the
excellent.
radio show
Yeah.
not too long ago. He's going to be
Yeah.
on the TV show here with us
Yeah.
in June, I think.
Yeah, he had some wonderful stories. Yeah, I
he's a
think he
great
is in
guy
June.
too. He's a really just genuine person. And
Really?
there's so few of those people in the world that you kind of latch onto those people when you find them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to meeting him.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
a nice
But
guy.
right now, we're just about at the bottom of the hour, so we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes on Edge of Reality TV.
Okay, don't go away.
Welcome back to Edge of Reality TV with Willie Hassell and Lynn Nickerson, and our
Right.
guest tonight, Joni Mayhan. But before we go back to Joni, we just want to mention one more time, it's coming up this Saturday, the New England Parafest 2017. It's at the Kittery Community Center in Kittery, Maine. We're going to have a great lineup of speakers throughout the day, and all proceeds from this event go to the Hilldale Cemetery Association right here in Haverhill, Mass., which is a registered nonprofit. And it's going to be a great day. We hope everybody comes out. And if you come, say hi. Okay, Joni,
Okay.
welcome back.
Welcome back, Joni. Let me see, we were talking about, well, souls and so forth and recognizing soulmates. But I also wanted to get into, now that we're here and, we pick up on the signs, but we often need guide from other people. And there's a variety of guides, our family guides and then animal guides or angel guides. So could you break that down a little bit for us? We kind of did talk about family guides more or less. How about animal totems?
Yeah.
Do you feel that people have to subscribe to a Native American way of thinking in order to have an animal totem?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
that animals are sent to us as messengers a lot.
I think so too.
And an example for me would be I was at a crossroad in my life trying to decide what to do, and I was driving down to a Paranormal 101 class actually, and a bald eagle soared down out of the sky right in front of me, so I couldn't miss it. And then he landed on a tree branch, so I drove right under him. So he was definitely trying to be seen.
Yeah.
And I don't have all the animal signs memorized, but they're all online. So I looked it up later, and when you see an eagle like that, it means you're going to soar above your problems, that everything's going to be okay. And so
Very
when we see
nice.
things like that, take a moment and think about what it means to you, and then also look it up and do some research. And sometimes it does come as a message.
I think it's really important to keep a journal, as you
Oh,
suggested,
definitely.
so that you know the date and what happened, and then you get a chance to look the stuff up, and then you can make the correlation between that and the message that it was giving you.
Right.
And then you start becoming more aware of the messages. I think that's really important.
I think it's important too. Yeah.
You had also mentioned dragonflies coming to you a lot.
Yeah, at certain points,
Yeah.
and dragonflies are hopeful. They let you know that things are going to be better and that you're on a good path. So, and there are also sometimes signs of loved ones coming. It depends on what that means to you. Like
Yeah.
if your mother loved dragonflies and collected collectibles with dragonflies, and then you start seeing them, then it could be a sign that your mother's there. So it
Might
could
make a
mean
connection.
several different things.
Yeah.
You have to sit and think about, what does this mean to me? How is this relevant?
A lot of
I
people.
don't like dragonflies myself.
You don't? I think they're
Well, there's a
kind of
story behind it, but
Oh, okay. Probably bit you then, right?
no.
A lot of people see cardinals.
Yes, and my friend, psychic medium Brandy Wells, that the cardinals plume.
My backyard. But it's not. My backyard. Dead birds. That's makes you wonder.
Yeah, it could just be the circle of life.
Yeah, it
just
could be.
reminding you that everything here is not forever,
Yeah.
and we have to go on.
But I think probably the fact that two more show up the next year is a good sign.
Yeah, one
It's
pair
hope.
will die, and
Yeah.
then
Right.
so they don't have to be alone. What about feathers? You mentioned white feathers a lot.
Yeah, feathers, people see those as signs, and I would say, always use some dose of skepticism, because feathers are everywhere. You're going to find feathers. But if it's somewhere you wouldn't be expecting a feather, like
Yeah.
maybe on the seat of your car, or somewhere that is almost like it's placed there that you see. Someone told me a story last night at a presentation I gave about
Oh.
a feather. She said that after her mother died, her mother collected feathers and specific types of feathers, and they were trying to decide where to bury her mother. And there was like a falcon feather in the ground standing straight up right in one of the empty spots that they were considering. And she said, well, I think my mother just picked out her own spot. And so that's what they went with. They took that as a sign that that's what her mother wanted.
That's amazing. What was
Interesting.
the connection with the mother and the falcon? Was there any connection?
It might have been one of the feathers that her mother collected
Oh,
specifically.
okay. There was also another guy who had a friend. I think this is the one that wore the motorcycle jacket, and the friend died, and well, he kept appearing with a white feather. Do you remember that one? For like 2 weeks.
Oh, I don't think that one's feathers, but if it's the motorcycle jacket, that's a really good story.
Yeah, please tell us.
Yeah, and that's my friend Billy Miller from Indiana shared that story with me.
Oh.
It was about his grandparents, and his grandfather died suddenly, and it left the family in a pretty financially precarious position because they couldn't afford to make the payments on the house, and they were getting ready to lose the house. And every night for several weeks, she kept seeing her husband at the foot of the bed, and he was wearing a motorcycle jacket with a lot of zippers on it. And then he would just fade away into the closet and disappear. And finally, the last night, she got up and followed what she saw go into the closet, and she opened the closet, and there was the motorcycle jacket sitting right there, and it had all these zippers, and so she opened the zippers, and that's where he had been stashing money, and it was enough money for them to pay for the house. So that was his savings account, and he didn't tell anybody, but he came back to her afterwards and told her. So it's one of my favorite stories in
That is
Signs
wonderful.
of Spirits.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
They didn't lose the house. How about Brandy Wells? Now, she had a lot of good stories to tell, too. And she mentioned that her daughter had chosen her as a mother.
Right, yes. And just meeting Brandy Wells was a really big synchronicity as well.
How so?
She has a radio show and she was looking for a guest, and I didn't see the post. One of my friends saw it and tagged me on it, so I contacted her. And I ended up on her show, and I thought, we have so much in common, and we have so many beliefs that are so similar. I'm going to interview her for my book. And as we were talking, everything that I was talking about, or everything she was talking about, was very in sync with what I believed. And so she started sharing stories with me, and she said that probably her biggest aha moment as a developing psychic medium came through having a child who was very intuitive. And her daughter said, I picked you, Mommy. You're the one I wanted. And I do believe that we pick our own parents before we reincarnate.
Yeah,
We
I've
pick
heard
our
that.
situations that we want to learn and grow through. And it may not always be a nice situation, like Brandy's daughter has, but it may be a difficult situation because maybe we have a lesson that we know that we need to learn while we're here.
I know being here sometimes it's hard to believe that we made that decision.
Right,
But we
right.
do,
But
we have to learn.
We don't want it. An easy path doesn't have any bumps, and therefore we don't learn anything from it. So we're
Yeah.
often going to pick a path with a lot of obstacles so that we can become stronger.
Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. We were talking about, well, I was reading about Sharon, and she lost, I don't know if you remember this story, she lost her mother at 90. Both her parents apparently had been sort of abused and at the hospice, and they were sort of almost forced to die. And do you recall that?
Yeah, that's not as well as some of the other stories, but she's very intuitive. I know that, and she's often picked up on the signs from her parents.
Yeah, very, very sad story. The lady wound up dying at 90. Also, Crystal, is it Pina?
Pena.
She worked at a nursing home, and there was one fellow that was a really difficult patient. His name was Leo,
Yeah,
and then he finally passed away, but he communicated with her later.
yeah. Yeah, he was somebody that most of the other people at the hospital avoided. They just put up with him, but she made it her goal to be nice to him and to kind of win him over. And she had a sign from him later on after his death, so she knew that he appreciated what she did. And she, he only came to her one time, and then after that he was gone, but she was able to know that he was saying thank you.
That's so neat, because I think people can be so cruel to those in nursing homes.
Yeah.
They just think they're at the end of the line, and
Yeah, there is one story from, I think it's Signs of Spirits, that kind of falls into this same storyline, but this woman had a necklace that her father had given her, and her father had died years ago, and she was in the hospital sick, and her necklace disappeared at the hospital. And she thought perhaps somebody walked off with it or it disappeared, and she was really upset because you can't replace those kind of things. And she was back home a few days later, and she was in her kitchen doing the dishes, and she heard a loud crash from her bedroom, and she went in, and she had a large bottle of whiskey that her father, it used to belong to her father, so it was like a keepsake, nice jar of whiskey, and it fell off the bureau with a crash and broke on the floor. And she was very upset because that was her father's, and again, you can't replace that. And she immediately made her think of the necklace. Well, I don't have anything left of my father now. And she went into the kitchen to get paper towels to come clean up the mess, and there in the middle of the floor was her necklace. So I think that the validation was that he broke the bottle of whiskey, maybe to show her that he is always with her, and she doesn't necessarily need the keepsakes, but here's the necklace back.
that's a touching story.
Yeah, it's a nice story.
You do have several stories in there about items disappearing and then showing up again.
Right.
And sometimes we don't know if maybe there's a playful leprechaun, or
Right. Or
Or
we're
maybe it's a
forgetful.
ghost.
Yeah,
Or
sometimes
we're forgetful too. There's always
we try
that.
to rationalize it and think maybe I didn't put my glasses there. Maybe I did put them somewhere else. But sometimes it could be a sign.
Also, too, now we have Barbara Niles in the audience that you
We
brought
do.
along, and she had a story about her nephew Justin, about the wallet. Lost the wallet. Well, it was returned 3 weeks later when Justin asked where it was. The suggestion was to ask Papa where the wallet went because it just disappeared out of the house, and it eventually, I guess, showed up in the bureau 3 weeks later.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have so many stories in
Yeah,
these two books
yeah,
that
sorry
I
to
don't
catch you off
remember
guard.
all of them without having to go back and look them up again.
Yeah.
It's called getting old.
Older.
Older,
Called getting
okay,
older.
older.
None
No,
of us
it's
are
just,
old.
It's just having too much to do.
There you go, I
But
like
nothing
that
to do
better.
with age.
I know. Now, Barbara shared quite a few really great stories with me in that book. So
Have you
she's
another one you can
intuitive, so
recall?
she's open to seeing signs. So she's going to therefore see the signs that come to her.
That was Paul, by the way. He had a drug addiction, and he wound up dying, and he left his friend a white feather for 2 weeks. I confused the two stories.
Okay.
That was the other one. Now, Gare Allen, he wrote a book called The Dead, I believe. He had some really interesting stories, too, but he did talk about learning to astrally project, and he managed to astrally project to the moon.
It was one of the places that he always wanted to go. I mean,
Amazing.
really, think about it. You know, if you can astral project and leave your body, I'd be going to the moon.
Yeah,
That'd be cool. I'd like
unlimited.
to walk around and check it out. So,
See who's there.
Yeah.
yeah, you know, and you're not in your body, so you don't have to worry about atmosphere and gravity and all those good things, you know. So, but while he was there, he met his spirit guide, Celine, and she was able to connect with him. So it gave him some validation of that he was in the right place. And he's had a lot of interesting experiences. I love that book, The Dead.
Very interesting. And he mentioned something about seeing his cord that went all the way back to Earth.
Yeah, and watching his silver cord. Yeah.
Yeah. How about, when we were talking about synchronicity, how about the synchronicity with the daughter that was named Winter, that was a twin?
Oh, that's an incredible story. Yes, I wrote a book called, a trilogy called
trilogy,
Winter
yeah.
Woods, and it was set in a fictionalized version of New Harmony, where I now live. I wrote that before I moved there. I grew up nearby, so I was aware of the town, but it's always been a town that's intrigued me. And I decided to set the book up and have it about two twins named Winter and Summer. And Winter is albino, and Summer is your most beautiful teenager ever. So there's always going to be a conflict between those two. Well, when I actually moved to New Harmony, like 2 years after I wrote that book, one of the first people I met was my friend Jason Nelson. And as he introduced me, he told me he had twin daughters. One of them's name was Winter. And he's become a really good friend. In fact, Winter and her sister Silver are pet sitting for me right now while
Really?
I'm in Massachusetts. So it was a definite, sometimes when you see those synchronicities and those
Yeah.
validations, it lets you know that you've made good choices, that you're where you need to be. And so that was a good one for me. Once I met him and realized, you know, his daughter's name was Winter, I knew that I'd made the right decision of moving to Indiana and,
Yeah.
and that he would be a good friend.
His daughter's name was Silver?
Silver, Winter and Silver.
Oh, be darned. Oh, that's amazing, amazing synchronicity. As well as the Fugly story.
Yes, that's
Amazing too. I was in disbelief when I read that.
That was really, I have 16 published books, but I also have 7 books that I wrote before that I never got published. So those are practice books, and I've been trying to get published since 1999 was when I wrote my first book. And it's a trial and error process, and you have to master your craft and get better at.
Yeah.
But one of my books that I really tried hard to get published was a book called Indiana Insanity. And it revolved around a character named Shelby, and she had a dog named Fugly. And Fugly was, I think I described as a combination between terrier and wombat. He was so ugly, he was ugly, he wasn't cute. And he had a real personality, took over the book. And I had been waiting to hear back from an agent. I was trying to get an agent, and she was, she would send me, she'd say, okay, you need to do this, and so I'd do this and send it back to her, and I'd wait 3 months and then come back, and she'd say,
And
you need
tweak
to do
it
this.
here and-
Yeah, and
yeah.
this went on for a full year. And during that process, I was a basket case, because that's all I really wanted to do was write books. And I was working part-time at a pizza place, and I was back behind the counter. It was 100 degrees in that kitchen. I was flipping pizzas, and they had the door propped open because it was hot in there. And all of a sudden I looked up, and in the doorway stood Fugly. There was no doubt he was exactly as I saw him in my head. And in the book, I had continued on with this series. Even though I hadn't gotten the first one published, I had continued on. I'd written 2 more books about Fugly. And in the book I was writing, he had just gotten skunked. And as I walked, I literally just wrote that scene that morning before I went to work. And as I walked closer, I just drifted around the counter. Yeah, I was supposed to be working, but I was
Drawn
just
to the dog.
I walked to the dog, and the dog had just been skunked. So I ended up taking the dog home that night, much to my husband's, at the time's dismay, and bathed this dog and got it, you know, but then I had to put up the found posters around town.
Yeah.
And somebody did call and said, that's my dog. And she came to pick up the dog, and I was devastated. I just pictured me keeping this dog, Fugly, forever, and that it being a sign that I was going to get this book published. And as she was leaving, I said, by the way, what is the dog's name? She said, Destiny. The dog's name was Destiny. And so if that
Your
wasn't a clear
destiny.
sign that I can look back in hindsight and see this was my destiny.
Yeah.
But I just needed to be a little bit more patient. Things
Yeah.
don't always come to you when you want them. They come to you when you're ready for them. And so it was my destiny, and my guides were there telling me.
It's almost as if
Overnight success takes years.
yeah.
That's right.
It's almost like you manifested the dog yourself.
It was, I can't, and this was a small town, probably population 800. So the odds of this dog just materializing like that was very rare.
Yeah. Unreal. Well, you also have some other things that materialize, and you wrote several books on them, sometimes on the darker side of things. So I wanted to mention what are some of the precautions you can take for protecting yourself, because you have been harassed by some negative entities.
One of my more recent books is called Ghost Magnet. And that's because I have been a ghost magnet all my life. They've been drawn to me. And sometimes they aren't the greatest entities. Most of my previous books have been about my darker experiences. Soul Collector, and that's a really Devil's Toy Box. They talk about some of my darker experiences. And I think a lot of it has to do with your own personal vibration. We talked about that a little bit earlier. But my vibration wasn't necessarily real high for a period of time. I went through some times where it was not always easy, and I did a lot of learning and growing during that time, but I also drew in some darker energy. And at the time, I really didn't understand about grounding and shielding and working with your spirit guides for paranormal protection like I do now. So I raised my vibration. I just decided to be happy. And I know that's hard, but I made a lot of life changes in order to be happy. Moving to Indiana, I gave up a lot, but I also gained a lot in the process, and my vibration's very high now. I'm very happy, everything's going well, and I'm in the right place. And I work on grounding and shielding, where grounding, I just purge out any energy that doesn't belong to me, doesn't serve my greater good. And by doing that, I basically take deep breaths, and I envision a white light above my head. And with every breath, I pull that white light in, and I push out the negative excess energy through my feet into the ground. And then I follow it up with a bubble of protection. I just take that white light, I pull it down around me mentally, envision it protecting me and shielding me. And I ask my spirit guides to keep it in place and to keep anything negative away from me. And I have been fairly successful. In the last 6 months, I haven't had a lot of issues.
So you went to this, what was it? It was an old prison. That's where...
The prison camps, yes.
Yeah, and then you returned again, even after you...
Well, you know, sometimes I'm braver than I should be.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. I'm a curious person.
Yeah.
So I can't not know something. If there's an experience out there, I need to have it. And it's gotten me into a lot of trouble. But in the case of the soul collector, we were investigating at a prison camp, and people hike there and they walk their dogs there. So most people
Yeah,
don't
so-
have any issues there. But there was something dark there, and it latched onto me. And I had it for a while, and it was a soul collector, and it was very difficult. It was my first really bad experience in the paranormal realm.
Yeah.
And after a year passed and I'd finally gotten rid of it, I decided I needed to face my fears, because I was looking at this place like it was hell itself, and I needed to not give it that power. Sometimes we empower things with our thoughts, so I needed to go there and face my fears. And what I learned when I went back there was that what they had pulled off of me, they had removed his collection, so he was not as strong, but they had sent him right back to the prison camp, so I picked him up again.
Really?
So I talk about that in my book, Ghost Magnet. So grounding and shielding are very important, but working with your spirit guides and teaching them what they, like a lot of times when I go to places where I want to pull information, but I don't necessarily want to bring home hitchhikers, I will instruct my guides before I get there. I surround me with protection. Do not let anything get close to me, but I do want to still get information. And I've had a lot of luck with that. So it's trial and error. What works for me is not going to work for everybody.
How do you know which guides to solicit help from them?
It doesn't really matter, really. You can just ask. They don't care. They're always there for us. But I do talk to my primary guide, and she leads the pack and decides what I need and who I need. So you don't really need to know your guides' names. You don't need to know what they look like. You just need to know that they're there and they're there for you, and to communicate with them and ask them for help, and they will.
You said a lot of people go there walking their dogs and they're just there casually, not doing anything. Do you think that part of some of these people's attitude, maybe being oblivious to the paranormal, might have something to do with the fact that they weren't bothered, whereas you were, because you were aware?
Well, they probably weren't aware of it. And there's a lot of people out there walking around with attachments that aren't aware of them.
Oh, really?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you see people with personality changes and going through issues and going through series of bad luck and bad things happening to them. And sometimes a relative had it happen several times where people have come to me and said, I think my niece has an attachment. Can you look into it? And I work with shaman Michael Robichaud, who I wrote my book Rune of Souls about, because he can work remotely. He's amazing. And he can send his spirit guides to other people. It's his gift. He's like a modern day superhero.
Truly.
And he has said, yes, she definitely has attachments, and pulls them off and leaves her cleansed, basically. And the issues all started going away. Her personality went back to normal, and
That's a
things
little
started
scary.
getting back. It is scary, and
Especially if it's a child.
I mean, and it doesn't have to be, people say they should stay away from the dark places. Well, ghosts are everywhere, negative energies everywhere. There's a couple in a Dollar Tree that I used to go to that I didn't like, and it wasn't like I was ghost hunting at a haunted prison. I was just shopping, and they're there. They're at the movie. They love movie theaters. They love hospitals.
Yes, and asylums.
And even active running churches. One of the most haunted places you could go to, because I mean, think about it.
Yeah,
if you did something wrong in this life and you're wanting retribution or forgiveness, where would you go? You go to a church because you're close. You feel like you're closer to God. So those
I've
places.
always thought that a church would probably be
They're
a
very
good place
haunted.
for haunted. Yeah.
You're talking about you going shopping and running into ghosts. Willie and I have a friend of ours who saw a contemporary ghost in a Walmart on a skateboard, and he disappeared in front of him.
Oh, well, that's
so unusual.
I saw one at the Walmart in Gardner.
Did you really?
Yeah, years ago I was walking, and there was a cord. They were under construction. There was a cord across the floor, so I saw this woman in orange, which was odd because they don't wear orange at Walmart, at a cash register, and it was kind of a temporary register set up by the door, and there was nothing within probably 15 feet of that register. And I looked down to step over the cord, and when I looked back up, she was gone, and there was nobody within anywhere. She couldn't have moved that fast.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they are definitely everywhere. You're going to see them.
I guess we're going to have to start investigating Walmarts.
You might find more than just ghosts.
More than you're
Yeah.
actually looking for.
Disgruntled people there.
Yeah, we're just about out of time.
Oh, okay. I was just going to ask about New Harmony, and how long do you think it'll be before you get your book out on that?
I'm hoping for June.
For
So
June.
June or July. So I'm working on it. Not this week, but I've been working on it.
2018.
Yeah.
This June or next June?
This June.
Oh,
this
wow.
June. It's coming along fast. So
And you've interviewed a lot of people
I have
and gotten
explored a
contributing
lot
stories.
of places.
That sounds like fun. So it's just a
Yes.
bunch of ghost stories.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically, I take it from a historical point. I try to
Good,
figure out who's
good.
haunting the building, and I go through the historical documents and find out who
Love
lived
it.
there and why the place might be haunted. So putting a name to the ghost.
Yeah. Wonderful. Good. Look forward to seeing
Yeah,
that
we'll
too.
look forward to that one.
And
You want to give
website?
out your website? Joni?
Yeah, anybody wants to learn more about me, I have a website, jonimayhan.com, and that's JoniMayhan.com. And it talks about where you can find my books or where you can find me and what I'm up to.
Okay.
And my blog, I have a paranormal blog on
Oh,
there.
good.
And all my EVPs, I have about 200 EVPs on
Do you?
SoundCloud that I have a link to. So if anybody wants to hear some of the things I've heard, they can find it.
And some of the
Love
links
that,
are embedded in the Kindle books too, aren't they?
Yes, yes. A lot of my books are interactive. You can click right on the link and it'll take you right to the EVP.
Right.
Very cool. All
Okay, well,
right.
Joni, thank you very much
Thank you for having
joining
me.
us. We
Pleasure.
finally get to meet you.
I know. It was very exciting.
Okay, and that's Edge of Reality TV, and Lynn and Willie,
Thank you for watching.
and we will talk to you again next month.